in a complete sentence or two, can you just state your name and where you're from?
My name's Laura Secord, and I live in Birmingham, Alabama, but I grew up in the Midwest and went to college in California. So I've been around this end of the country, all except for the Northeast. Not much time there.
Okay, sounds good. All right, and can you tell us who your ancestors are who were accused and what you know about them?
Okay, well, my ancestors that were accused were Lydia Gilbert, who was found guilty of witchcraft in 1654 in Windsor, Connecticut, and Catherine Harrison, who was accused in 1668 and was found guilty, but was not executed. And I have done a ton of research about these people. In fact, I've written a book. Here it is, which just came out this year. It took me 14 years from beginning to publication. And I did a lot of research. I'm really lucky to have my life partner be a genealogist, a historian, and a real big fan of archaeology. And he discovered my relationship with Lydia. And he helped help me with my research because he gave me tons of primary sources to look at. And also part of my research, besides reading everything I could get my hands on about the anthropology before we even settled in the New World, in the Connecticut colonies, I read all about the religious confusion and negotiation about what was the truth that was going on, which was very difficult for me to understand, but I read it. I did a lot of studying of secondary sources, and then I got a lot of primary sources. One of the best ones I got was the court records of the colonial colonies, and there were court records from Windsor from the days of Lydia Gilbert, and a map of Windsor which showed me other people that lived there, and I could see them in the court too. So I could start to see a picture of the community a little bit. And I looked very deeply into the lives of colonial women because I wanted to understand something beyond what we were taught in school. So I looked deeply into that. So then I came out and went to Windsor and Wethersfield and spent time in Connecticut to get a feel for that, since I had never been there before. And I hope that what I've done is create a book. It's a novel. It's a family saga about Lydia and Catherine. This is not proven. Lydia could have been Catherine Harrison's aunt. There is no proof of that, but there are speculation to that. And so I let that be the relationship. And so it shows the lives of two women who have come from Great Britain or from England to the colonies and are trying to establish a life and live here. And that's what we forget about when we talk about all this stuff, is these women were helping people live in a wild world that most people had no idea how to survive in. And the ordinary women like Lydia Gilbert and Catherine Harrison were helping people survive, and yet they were accused of crimes partially because they had skills and because people didn't understand why things happened. They didn't have science like we have now. They didn't know if someone died, it was an infection. They didn't know if something happened to an animal, there was a reason for it. They didn't know that the weather was caused by things that we know now. So assumptions were made about witchcraft because that was the going thinking at the time. And people were accused for no reason. That was one thing. But also people were accused for not having money, for asking for you to pay them what you owe them, or for being blessed with women who were blessed with a good life, like Catherine Harrison, were accused as well when they were, so things were not really about being in friendship with Satan. things were about people with greed, people who mistrusted each other, and of a level of, I would say, I hate to use the word ignorance. I mean, they are our forefathers and everything, our foremothers, but people were ignorant about why things happen in this world. And they were in a totally strange and unusual place that they didn't understand. And they were bringing very strong religious principles that they were fighting among themselves about as well. So it's very complicated, but we only get this little slice, and we make these decisions about the lives of these women and these men, but mostly it was women who were innocent. And yet we make these assumptions, and we, based on something that happened 375 years ago, and leave the descendants of these people with a stain on their ancestors, which, doesn't have to be. We're too wise for that now. And we have a country that's based on freedom of religion and has been created with equality among people, even though sometimes it's not always there as we wish it would be. So anyway, I actually wrote a list of reasons that I have a couple things. I talk an awful lot, Josh.
It's okay, you're doing wonderful.
Okay, but I'm very passionate about this story. And before I go, can I read a poem?
Oh yeah, that would be lovely.
Okay, I have two poems I wanted to read today. One is the poem that kind of speaks to how important women were as our foremothers. This country, this would never have been here without the hands of women keeping people alive. And they're never mentioned much in the history that we study. And so this is the poem that gives the title of my book, An Art of Craft, a Mystery. And it talks to the work of women. And I just think it kind of speaks to everybody's ancestors who have been accused. And even the men that were accused were usually accused for being in good relation with their okay. So anyway, this poem is called An Art of Craft, a Mystery. We kept the small alive from day to day, kept households warm, kept bread made, while men sat in the meeting house in ceaseless debate on sin, redemption, destiny. Their grace came through women's works, watching fires and keeping coals ablaze. Their salvation through women's hands, gathering each day's yeasted scraps for tomorrow's meal, a sacred pact. Don't think these skills were simple. They were an art, a craft, a mystery. Yet when the men took notice, they questioned diligence and named it witchery. So that is, I think, one of the overall guiding stories behind many, many of our ancestors' stories. And what is so shameful is when they have this, veil of shame over them for being accused, then we never come to celebrate the fact that they helped this country be born. And we have to carry instead that their legacy has been tarnished. Although, we wouldn't be here if they hadn't been here and survived for time enough to have children, create these descendants that we are. And it concerns me right now because it seems like there's a move to begin to vilify women again. And that is one of the reasons I think it's so important right now to do something about this, because of the turn that I see going in this country, where neighbors going to accuse neighbor of things, what's happening to teachers, the treatment of healthcare providers through the pandemic. All these things have made false accusation and such an issue right now, as it seems to be building, and things are being built on some false stories and false beliefs, are causing people to turn against each other. And this was part of our heritage in this country too, which is a shame. We figured it out and we created a constitution and a bill of rights that came around those things and talked about those things. But right now it's rising back up again, and I'm concerned that that this story, doing something about this story, would be like a stand to say, hey, we believe these women were innocent. They were foremothers. They helped build this country. Let's take the stain off their legacy and celebrate them instead. And that's kind of what I tried to do with this book. Okay, so, but I mean, I feel like the real stories of real people is filled with every single thing we go through today. Worry, suffering, loss, joy, happiness. And if we look at these as just those drawings that we see of those gnarly women that are like being dragged in to the, that's just all stereotypical. And if we continue to